There was a special kind of dad that existed within my generation. I'm talking about the dads who bought their kids an Xbox and sat down with them to play Halo Combat Evolved. I had one of these dads, and my time interacting with the Halo community lately has shown me my dad wasn't the only one who introduced his kids to Halo when they were young. Now I want to dive into this phenomenon and find out what it was about them that made Halo so appealing. I believe there's one distinct trait that someone needed to have in order to become a Halo dad. And oddly enough, it's something I learned in business school. But before the business lesson, we need to get a better idea of who these dads were. To start, these dads needed to enjoy video games. Personally, my dad was probably on the older side of the Halo dad spectrum, being 35 in the year 2000. So I find it a little more surprising that he was into video games as much as he was. Though I imagine some of you out there with dads who were younger around this time may, in hindsight, have an easier time making sense of why your dad liked video games. For me, my dad was this goofy kid at heart kind of guy because of things like his love for video games in 2001 as a 36-year-old man. This kind of dad also needed to be resilient against the news machine that at the time endlessly propagated that the increasing realism of video games was going to ruin us children. My mom still remembers reading an article about how the US military was using Halo Combat Evolved to desensitize soldiers to the horror of war.
The Army was using Halo on a sniper base to do one thing, to get the snipers prepared psychologically to be willing to kill as snipers.
These dads had to navigate these tough conversations and sometimes fight tooth and nail in order to grant us limited access to these games. In my household, we won the agreement that we could play Halo CE alongside my dad as long as we promised not to shoot the Marines, producing unnecessary human blood within the game. And I'd love to hear other creative ways your dad may have made an agreement for you to play these games with him. We'll ask the interesting question as to why they fought so hard to get us to play these games later. For now, we're going to get to the business world application as to what drew our dads to Halo in the first place. We're going to talk about the technology adoption curve. So we have to talk about what an early adopter is. An early adopter is defined as somebody who embraces new products or technologies before the majority catches on. The early adopters are typically 13% of the market for a product. These are the people who purchase a product or vibe with a new technology early on because they just get it. My theory is that the people who are most likely to have been Halo dads were specifically likely to be early adopters of new technologies that were releasing at the break of the new century. Is century the right word? I think so. Well, is it? It's not millennium. Is it millennium? So one day in business class, we're on the topic of the early adopter, and when they were describing who this person was and what it means to a brand or a product, this idea just clicked into my head. And it comes from a pretty unlikely product. I'd like to run a test with it. How many of you who have dads that introduced you to Halo also had your TV through TiVo during your childhood? And now stay with me, it's related. Here, I'm going to play a clip from a pretty famous TED Talk.
Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo is a commercial failure. They've never made money.
And as you can see, the Halo dads were people who saw what TiVo was capable of and that didn't need a fancy sales pitch on TiVo's why, because the impressive quality and technology alone was enough to get them excited, while the majority stayed apprehensive and clearly needed more to be sold. And the fact that TiVo failed to make a compelling why and win over the majority isn't important here. The early adopters of TiVo are, because these people are one and the same with the Halo dads. Now, with this understanding, we can talk about the Xbox. There's this great documentary on the creation of Xbox, and it's available to watch for free on YouTube. I highly recommend it. Learning about where the Xbox comes from within Microsoft tells us a lot about its target consumer in 2001. Because Sony and its PlayStation were rapidly becoming the largest player in the gaming sphere. When Microsoft set out to create and then sell its invention, the Xbox, to consumers, they had a unique sales pitch. Using the credibility created with the PC and Windows, they pitched the idea of having a super powerful PC-like console that would help developers create the games of their dreams. This marketing approach promised power, developer flexibility, and PC-adjacent functions, and it was the perfect recipe in creating excitement among early adopters of tech during this time. This sales pitch was critical in creating your favorite Halo memories. So putting everything we've talked about together, we have these dads who are tech savvy and interested in video games that had recently been sold on the idea of a Microsoft Windows powered machine becoming the powerhouse of the gaming industry. The last ingredient was coming together in the last month before the console's release. A development team named Bungie was working on a new IP called Halo that was set to release alongside the console's launch. Halo was the culmination of everything Xbox had going for it. Impressive graphics and developer tools that allowed Bungie to innovate and bring the FPS genre to console for the first time. It was a massive selling point that tipped sales past the early adopter market and into the majority for Xbox. This success was so important to that era of gaming. These early adopters understood from the minute they watched that first cutscene that Halo was the future. A future their kids would take part in. This is why those dads fought so hard to let us play. Not only was it a great form of bonding between father and son, but there was a certain importance they placed on letting us in on experiencing something they knew was special. I've just never seen anybody talk about this before, and I find it so interesting. I mean, Halo said M for mature right on the box. It would have been so simple for these dads to just play Halo on their own time after we went to bed, leaving us to play something like SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom or Spider-Man or Scooby-Doo. But no, they were committed to playing this game with us, arguing with our mothers on our behalf, disregarding the local news. It must have been important for some reason that we were able to experience that game with them. For me, the best I can do now is speculate this thought about why my dad was so adamant about playing this game with me back then. I can't ask him about these things as an adult because he passed away while I was still pretty young. So I'd like to ask any of you who still have your Halo dads around, ask him what attracted him to Xbox and ultimately Halo. Maybe show him this video. Ask him why he fought so hard to let you play that violent, brain-rotting video game. And as a favor to me, just thank him for being the coolest dad of an era. I'll catch you next time.